He smiled at the sign, stepped inside. The staff laughed. Everyone says they're a vet. Then the manager came out and turned pale. He pointed at a photo on the wall. That's him. And suddenly, the meal wasn't free. It was sacred. The hometown diner on Veterans Day buzzed with its usual morning crowd, enhanced by the holiday atmosphere that brought families together to honor those who had served their country. The Veterans Eat Free sign in the window had attracted several customers claiming military service, though the teenage staff had grown skeptical of some claims as the day progressed. Among those entering was an elderly man whose modest appearance and quiet demeanor suggested he might be another questionable claimant seeking a free meal. The hostess, 17-year-old Madison Walsh, had been working at the diner for 6 months and had developed what she considered a good eye for distinguishing genuine veterans from those trying to take advantage of the restaurant's generous Veterans Day offer. The elderly man approaching her station looked like he might fall into the questionable category. No military cap, no service pins, no obvious indicators of military service that she had learned to recognize. "Table for one," the man said quietly, his voice carrying a slight tremor that Madison attributed to advanced age rather than emotion. When she mentioned the Veterans Day special, he nodded appreciatively but made no immediate claim to military service, instead asking simply to be seated wherever was convenient. His humble response actually made Madison more suspicious rather than less. Welcome to Silent Salute. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being a part of it. Frank Morrison had served his country for 36 years, including combat tours in Vietnam, peacekeeping missions in the Balkans, and advisory roles in Iraq that had tested every aspect of military leadership and personal courage. His retirement from the Army as a command sergeant major had been marked by ceremonies recognizing his contributions to military excellence, but those days seemed distant as he sat alone in a small-town diner on Veterans Day. The transformation in Frank's life since his wife's death 2 years earlier had been profound and difficult. The military community that had sustained him throughout his career had gradually faded as friends moved away or passed on, leaving him isolated in a civilian world that often seemed disconnected from the military values and experiences that had defined his adult life. Madison's approach to Frank's table was professional but slightly wary, as she had been instructed to verify military service before applying the Veterans Day discount. Her questions about his military background were polite but probing, reflecting the restaurant's experience with fraudulent claims that had necessitated more careful verification procedures. Frank's responses were modest and general, acknowledging Army service without providing the kind of detailed information that might establish credibility with someone unfamiliar with military culture. His reluctance to elaborate on his service record reflected humility rather than deception, but Madison interpreted his vague answers as potential evidence of false claims. The situation escalated when other staff members became involved in the verification process, with server Jake Martinez expressing skepticism about Frank's claim to military service. Jake's grandfather had served in Vietnam, and he felt protective of veteran benefits, leading him to challenge customers who couldn't provide convincing evidence of military service. The confrontation that developed was uncomfortable for everyone involved, with Frank maintaining his dignity while younger staff members questioned his credentials with increasing boldness. Their skepticism was motivated by genuine desire to protect veteran benefits, but their methods reflected inexperience with military culture and the diversity of veteran backgrounds. The transformation came when restaurant manager Carol Stevens emerged from her office to investigate the commotion at Frank's table. Carol had been managing the hometown diner for 15 years, and her experience with veteran customers had taught her to recognize authentic military bearing even when it wasn't immediately apparent to younger staff members. Carol's initial assessment of Frank confirmed her suspicions that the staff had made an error in questioning his veteran status. His posture, his respectful demeanor, his patient response to their questions all suggested genuine military experience rather than fraudulent claims. But it was his face that made her stop everything and stare in recognition. The photograph hanging on the diner's wall of honor showed a much younger version of Frank Morrison in military dress uniform, surrounded by other soldiers during a ceremony that had taken place decades earlier. The image was part of a collection honoring local veterans, but Carol had never expected to meet any of the people pictured in the historical photographs. The recognition was immediate and overwhelming. Carol realized that she had been watching her staff interrogate one of the most distinguished veterans ever to enter her restaurant, a man whose military service had been significant enough to merit inclusion in their Wall of Honor display that celebrated local military history. Frank Morrison's service record, which Carol quickly retrieved from the documentation accompanying the photograph, revealed military achievements that exceeded anything the young staff had encountered. His decorations included the Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and numerous other awards that reflected extraordinary service during multiple conflicts and peacekeeping missions. The Silver Star had been earned during combat operations in Vietnam, when Frank had led a rescue mission that saved 12 American soldiers from a position that was being overrun by enemy forces. His leadership during that engagement had demonstrated the kind of courage under fire that earned lasting recognition within military communities. The Bronze Star reflected his performance during peacekeeping operations in Bosnia, where Frank had successfully negotiated the release of American personnel who had been detained by hostile forces. His diplomatic skills and military bearing had resolved a situation that could have escalated into international incident. The Purple Heart documented wounds he had sustained during the same Vietnam engagement that had earned his Silver Star, injuries that had required months of recovery but hadn't prevented him from completing his tour of duty and continuing his military career for 3 additional decades. Carol's apology to Frank was immediate and heartfelt, but his response was characteristically gracious, understanding that the staff had been trying to protect veteran benefits rather than maliciously questioning his service. His humility in the face of their error demonstrated the character that had enabled exceptional military leadership throughout his career. The education that followed transformed the staff's understanding of military service and the diversity of veteran backgrounds. Frank's willingness to share appropriate aspects of his military experience provided insights into military culture that enhanced their ability to serve veteran customers with appropriate respect and recognition. The respect that Frank received from the restaurant staff was immediate and profound, reflecting their understanding that they had been in the presence of someone whose military service had exceeded their ability to recognize or appreciate without additional context and education about military achievements. The meal that Frank received was indeed free, but the experience transcended simple Veterans Day promotion to become recognition of service that had contributed significantly to American military success during multiple conflicts. The ceremony that developed around his recognition honored both his individual achievement and military tradition generally. The story of Frank's recognition spread throughout the local community, becoming an example of how veteran recognition could be enhanced through better understanding of military culture and the diverse backgrounds that veterans brought to civilian communities seeking to honor their service. The Hometown Diner's staff training was enhanced by lessons learned from Frank's visit, with Carol developing procedures that balanced appropriate verification of veteran status with respect for military culture and the humility that often characterized distinguished military service. The Wall of Honor display gained new significance as staff and customers understood that the photographs represented real people whose service had been significant enough to merit lasting recognition. Frank's presence connected historical displays to living veterans who continued the tradition of military service. The Veterans Day celebrations at the Hometown Diner became more meaningful as staff gained appreciation for the significance of veteran recognition and their role in honoring military service through community support and acknowledgement of veteran contributions to national security and community well-being. The respect that Frank earned from the restaurant staff continued throughout his subsequent visits, as his military background provided credibility and dignity that enhanced his connection to civilian communities seeking to support veteran populations through recognition and appropriate services. Veterans organizations learned about Frank's recognition and began developing programs to educate civilian businesses about military culture and veteran recognition, using his experience to demonstrate how proper understanding could enhance community support for veteran populations. The psychological impact on Frank was significant and positive, as the recognition he received reminded him that his military service remained valued by civilian communities even when it wasn't immediately apparent to people unfamiliar with military culture and achievement. Military transition programs incorporated Frank's experience into education about civilian community integration, using his story to demonstrate how veteran recognition could be enhanced through community education about military culture and the importance of respectful acknowledgement of military service. The hometown diner became a gathering place for local veterans, with Frank's recognition encouraging other veterans to visit and connect with civilian communities that demonstrated appreciation for military service through both symbolic gestures and practical support for veteran populations. The Wall of Honor display was expanded to include more recent photographs and information about local veterans, with Frank's story inspiring greater community participation in recognizing and documenting veteran service that contributed to local military heritage and community understanding. Years later, Frank's recognition at the hometown diner was remembered as a moment that had demonstrated the importance of community education about military culture, while showing how proper recognition could enhance veteran integration into civilian communities that sought to honor military service. The staff members who had questioned Frank's veteran status carried forward enhanced understanding of military culture and veteran recognition, applying lessons learned from their error to improve their interactions with veteran customers and their understanding of military service diversity. Sometimes the most distinguished veterans are those who claim their benefits most quietly, seeking recognition not for personal validation, but for connection to communities that value military service and understand the sacrifices that service members have made throughout their careers in defense of American freedom and security. Frank Morrison had simply wanted to enjoy a quiet Veterans Day meal while connecting to civilian communities that honored military service, never expecting that his modest presence would prompt questions about his veteran status, or that his distinguished military background would be revealed through a photograph hanging on the restaurant wall that documented his exceptional service and sacrifice. The comprehensive transformation at the hometown diner following Frank's recognition extended far beyond individual acknowledgement to encompass systematic changes in how the restaurant approached veteran recognition, staff education, and community engagement, with veteran populations seeking connection to civilian communities that appreciated military service. The staff training program was immediately enhanced with comprehensive education about military culture, veteran recognition, and the importance of respectful verification procedures that honored military service while protecting veteran benefits from fraudulent claims that could undermine community support for legitimate veteran populations. Carol Stevens developed detailed protocols for veteran recognition that balanced appropriate verification of military service with respect for military culture and the humility that often characterized distinguished military service, understanding that proper recognition required education about military background diversity rather than stereotypical assumptions about veteran appearance. The Wall of Honor display was expanded to include comprehensive information about local veterans, with Frank's story inspiring greater community participation in recognizing and documenting veteran service that contributed to local military heritage, while enhancing civilian understanding of military culture and veteran contributions to community well-being. Educational programs for restaurant staff incorporated lessons learned from Frank's recognition, with training emphasizing the diversity of veteran backgrounds and the importance of respectful interaction with military personnel who might not conform to civilian expectations about veteran appearance or behavior patterns. The Veterans Day celebrations at the hometown diner gained new significance as staff and customers understood the profound importance of veteran recognition and their collective responsibility for honoring military service through community support, appropriate acknowledgement, and meaningful engagement with veteran populations seeking civilian community connection. Local veteran organizations learned about Frank's recognition and began collaborating with the restaurant to develop comprehensive programs that educated civilian businesses about military culture while enhancing community support for veteran populations through improved understanding of military service diversity and veteran needs. The psychological impact on Frank was transformative and positive, as the recognition he received reminded him that his distinguished military service remained valued by civilian communities even when it wasn't immediately apparent to people unfamiliar with military culture, achievement, and the ongoing contributions that veterans made to community well-being. Military transition programs incorporated Frank's experience into comprehensive education about civilian community integration, using his story to demonstrate how veteran recognition could be enhanced through community education about military culture while providing practical guidance for veterans seeking meaningful connection to civilian communities. The restaurant became a recognized gathering place for local veterans, with Frank's inspiring recognition encouraging other veterans to visit and connect with civilian communities that demonstrated genuine appreciation for military service through both symbolic gestures and practical support for veteran populations seeking community engagement and recognition. Congressional testimony about veteran community integration included references to Frank's case as an example of how civilian education about military culture could enhance veteran recognition while strengthening community support for veteran populations seeking meaningful connection to civilian communities that valued military service and sacrifice. International studies of veteran community integration featured Frank's recognition as an example of how civilian education could improve veteran services while demonstrating the importance of community engagement in supporting veteran populations transitioning from military to civilian life with dignity and appropriate recognition. The documentation of Frank's military service was preserved in community archives, ensuring that his contributions to military effectiveness and community well-being would be remembered while providing educational resources for future generations seeking to understand military service and veteran contributions to American security and freedom. Educational institutions studying veteran community integration incorporated Frank's experience into research about factors that contributed to successful veteran transition to civilian life, using his case to develop best practices for community support programs that honored military service while enhancing veteran quality of life. The respect that Frank earned from restaurant staff and community members continued throughout his subsequent involvement with civilian communities, as his military background provided credibility and dignity that enhanced his connection to civilian populations seeking to support veteran communities through recognition and appropriate services. Veterans organizations throughout the region used Frank's story to develop comprehensive programs that educated civilian businesses about military culture and veteran recognition, understanding that his experience provided practical guidance for enhancing community support for veteran populations while maintaining appropriate respect for military service. The psychological counseling programs for veterans incorporated Frank's recognition experience into discussions about community integration and the importance of civilian recognition for veteran mental health, understanding that appropriate acknowledgement could provide healing and validation for veterans seeking connection to civilian communities. Military family support programs included Frank's experience in educational materials about veteran community integration, helping families understand how civilian recognition could enhance veteran adaptation to post-military life, while providing guidance for families supporting veterans transitioning to civilian communities. The business training programs for establishments serving veteran populations were enhanced by lessons learned from Frank's recognition, with his experience providing practical guidance for civilian businesses seeking to honor military service while avoiding the verification challenges that could undermine veteran recognition efforts. The community outreach programs were expanded to include comprehensive education about military culture and veteran recognition, with Frank's story inspiring greater civilian engagement with veteran populations while demonstrating how proper understanding could enhance community support for military families and veteran service organizations. Years later, Frank's recognition at the hometown diner was remembered as a transformative moment that had demonstrated the crucial importance of community education about military culture while showing how proper recognition could enhance veteran integration into civilian communities that genuinely valued military service and sacrifice. The staff members who had initially questioned Frank's veteran status carried forward enhanced understanding of military culture and veteran recognition, applying lessons learned from their experience to improve their interactions with veteran customers while becoming advocates for appropriate veteran recognition within their community. The Wall of Honor display gained historical significance as community members understood that the photographs represented real people whose distinguished service had contributed to American security while demonstrating the ongoing presence of military heritage within civilian communities that benefited from veteran contributions. The legacy of Frank's recognition influenced how businesses throughout the community approached veteran services and recognition, creating new standards for civilian education about military culture while enhancing community support for veteran populations seeking meaningful connection to civilian life with dignity and respect. The transformation in community attitudes toward veteran recognition was exemplified by Frank's inspiring experience, as his story helped establish new standards for civilian understanding of military culture while creating opportunities for enhanced community support for veteran populations transitioning to civilian life. Frank's story became a cornerstone example in discussions about veteran community integration and the tremendous value of civilian education about military culture, demonstrating how proper understanding could enhance veteran recognition while strengthening community support for military families and veteran service organizations. The research studying veteran community integration incorporated Frank's experience into analyses of how civilian recognition could enhance veteran adaptation to post-military life, while utilizing community support in ways that benefited both individual veterans and the civilian communities they joined after completing military service. The respect that Carol Stevens and her staff demonstrated toward Frank through proper recognition became an example of how civilian businesses could honor military service while enhancing community support for veteran populations seeking connection to civilian life with appropriate acknowledgement of their military contributions. The educational impact of Frank's recognition extended throughout the local business community, influencing how civilian establishments approached veteran services. While demonstrating that proper recognition required understanding of military culture rather than assumptions based on civilian expectations about veteran appearance or behavior. The community pride that developed around Frank's recognition demonstrated how veteran acknowledgement could enhance civilian understanding of military heritage while strengthening community bonds between veteran and civilian populations who shared common values about service, sacrifice, and community well-being. The mentorship that Frank provided to younger community members became a bridge between military and civilian cultures, helping civilian populations understand military values while demonstrating how veterans could contribute to community well-being through continued service in civilian capacities that utilized military experience and expertise. Sometimes the most meaningful recognition comes not through formal ceremonies, but through moments when civilian communities demonstrate genuine understanding of military service and the sacrifices that veterans have made throughout their careers in defense of American freedom, security, and the values that define democratic society. Frank Morrison had simply wanted to enjoy a quiet Veterans Day meal while maintaining connection to civilian communities that honored military service, never expecting that his presence would prompt educational opportunities about military culture or that his distinguished service would be revealed through historical documentation that connected past achievement to present recognition. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever experienced a moment when initial skepticism was transformed into profound respect through the revelation of someone's true background and achievements? Have you witnessed how proper recognition can heal misunderstandings while strengthening community bonds? Tell us in the comments about times when discovering the truth about someone's service changed everything. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one.